Good evening, whiskey drinking friends. Tonight we have a very interesting double bill featuring one of my all-time favorite single malts and its evil twin brother. So, the Dalwhinnie 15-year-old is one of the famous classic malts. It's a Speyside single malt aged for 15 years, and it's an absolutely beautiful drink and probably my favorite depending on how I'm feeling. It is really something special. However, Dalwhinnie is the highest altitude distillery in Scotland, and because of the extreme temperatures in the wintertime, they cannot distill the Dalwhinnie 15-year-old, their standard drink, in the winter because of the coldness in the stills. Change the flavour profile. So they have decided to innovate and produce this instead, which is called Dalwhinnie Winter's Gold. It's a no age statement whiskey made in the same distillery through the same process, but just in the winter time. And they also, as you can see, this has been frosted, recommend that it's drunk frozen, very cold. So I want to drink these side by side with you, and let's have some comparative notes of my favorite single malt Scotch whiskey and its evil twin. First of all, when we look at the Dalwhinnie 15-year-old, it is very much a classic whiskey color. It is a golden amber. It's not red. It is just, when you think of a single malt whiskey, you think of something that's this color, and this is one of the classic malts, and it's very traditional, but it's not stodgy. It is a beautiful contemporary drink too. So I'm popping it open. Ooh. Rather curious soundtrack to that. And pouring myself a wee dram. As viewers of my previous videos will know, I'm a recent convert to the Glencairn style sniffler glass. It is a superior way to get the most out of your whiskey. I do still drink from a tumbler myself most often, but for reviews I'm going to be sticking with this glassware. That's special. It's so sweet, vanilla. It must be aged in American oak barrels, ex-bourbon barrels for sure. I don't think it's got any other finishing on it. There's some toffee and spiciness. Fruity. It's really complex but beautiful as well. Really hard to top this one for the nose. It's just so perfumey and wonderfully fragrant. Okay, let's have a taste. So this whiskey is very sweet. Bourbon whiskies are very sweet too, but this is not like a bourbon whiskey. This is much more subtle. The bourbon will give you a huge sock of vanilla-y honey sweetness, but this is much softer. This is floral. There is some honey to it, a bit more of a toffee flavor and some fruit, some very soft fruity notes. Not berries, more like pears and apples. Red apples though, not Granny Smith. It's very soft, this. It's definitely, towards the back of your tongue, a hint of a conference pear, soft and juicy pear flavor. This is a very rich and complex whiskey, and it's beautiful to drink straight. I would not mix this with water. It doesn't perform well when mixed with water. It's just perfect like it is. There's only the slightest hint of smoke on the nose, and no peat really. It's very smooth. Very smooth, vanilla-y, beautiful soft whiskey. I tend to prefer this style of whiskey overall. It's easier drinking, it's a more everyday kind of thing. It goes with every occasion. So I have a small drop left here, and the reason why I'm leaving the small drop in here is to do the usual water comparison test, and I'm warning you though that this doesn't perform very well with water, this drink, but I do want to take you through that experience. I also have here a bowl of coffee grounds. Now, if you want to refresh your nose for trying another whiskey or trying the whiskey in a different way, sniffing some fresh coffee grounds, while it's a pleasant experience in itself, does also sort of perform a reset function on your nose. In some high-end perfumiers around the world as well, they keep coffee grounds there so you can smell them between perfumes as well, so that your nose doesn't become overwhelmed. Beautiful. I also prefer medium ground coffee. I'm kind of a medium guy, I suppose. So there's a few drops of water gone into it. I'm mixing it in. See, I haven't changed the volume very much, it's only a few small drops. So the water's calmed it down a lot. It's brought out a more floral fragrance, which is enjoyable for sure. It has really calmed down the alcohol, so it burns your nose less. I can smell pears. The pears are much more present now. Pears and flowers, maybe heather, spring flowers. It's still very beautiful in the nose. See, the magic has gone on the palate though. It's turned a little bit bitter. Some of the complex fruit flavors have also been washed away. And definitely drink this one straight, not on the rocks, not with water. This is one for drinking straight up, and you won't be sorry. It's a very easygoing whiskey to drink straight. Absolutely, I do not recommend mixing the Dalwhinnie 15-year-old with water. Although on the nose, the fragrance is very pleasant with water. On the palate, it's just very watered down, weaker. There's some bitterness that comes through, and it doesn't do it any favors. So with the Dalwhinnie 15-year-old, absolutely splendid whiskey, sort of 35, 40 pounds thereabouts in most places. It's a standard. Everybody should have a bottle of this. It's great stuff. So I'm just going to clear my palate. A good sniff of the coffee. Now let's talk about this stuff. Controversial. It's not really gone down well with my friends who really enjoy their Scotch whiskey, but it is quite popular with people who want to have something that's more like a liqueur. And because you freeze it, I've stored this in the freezer, it's very thick and treacly and it feels in the mouth like a liqueur. And it's got a completely different flavor profile to the 15-year-old. So let's give this a go. Okay, so we look at this guy. The way he moves in the glass is very thick and treacly. See those long sticky legs down the side of the glass. Now because of the cold, the glass is misting up quite a lot, so the color is being lost, but it is more or less the same light amber color of the 15-year-old. There's not a lot difference in that. So let's have a sniff. So it's basically turpentine on the nose. Because of the low temperature, you're really not getting a lot on the nose. tiniest hint of maybe some smoke, but you really, there's nothing there. I'm gonna have a small taste now. So it's more bitter, and on the nose it's quite smoky. There's quite a heavy hit of smoke there. And it doesn't have the complex fruit flavours of the 15-year-old. It's hard to believe that it's essentially the same whiskey produced at a different time of year, because it behaves very differently. Of course they've blended it differently as well. It's a single malt, not a blend. And one day I'll explain to you why single malts are blended as well. But right now, know that all your single malts that you drink, unless they're considered single cask whiskies, have been blended. Okay, I'll tell you the story because I've given half of it away. A blended whiskey is not necessarily from one distillery. A blended whiskey may come from a multitude, and usually comes from a multitude of distilleries. A blended whiskey that is sold as a blended whiskey will usually also have some grain whiskey added to the malt whiskey. There are whiskies that are sold as blended malts, which will be malt whiskies from numerous distilleries, not blended with any grain whiskies. Some grain whiskies are not blended, and those are single grain whiskies. And I think I've covered all the important points there about blending, but most of the whiskey that you buy off of the shelf, unless it is labeled a single cask, will be from a single distillery, but they will blend several different casks together to get a consistent product. And the age statement on a malt whiskey will always be the age of the youngest whiskey that's got into the mix, and this leads to the proliferation of no age statement whiskies today. And no age statement whiskies have been marketed as a replacement for your younger aged whiskies, because they might have 5-year-old or 3-year-old whiskey in the mix, but they may also have some 15 and 20-year-old whiskey in the mix, and they don't want to sell it off as a very cheap low age statement whiskey. They've taken a different route, and that is to market it under a brand name, such as this Winter's Gold. It will have whiskies of several different ages in there. Okay, so back to the Winter's Gold. I also wanted to give it a chance to warm up a little bit. So I'm warming it up between my hands here, trying to release some of the flavour, because I think that the acerbic, smoky flavour is not all that this whiskey has to give. So there is some fruit coming from it now, and the toffee is back, the sweetness is back. So when it's frozen, it's very restrained, and I'm not sure it's such a good idea. I'm not sure you get the best out of this whiskey by freezing it. I think that's a bit of a marketing ploy, and perhaps leading to the somewhat unfavourable response that this whiskey gets from connoisseurs. It is a bit of a novelty. Maybe it's more of a vodka bar gig, giving young partygoers something different to try, some frozen whiskey. It's a neat trick, but I don't think that gets the best from it. And warming it up a little bit, sure, it is a different drink to its big brother. It's a lot more bitter, definitely a lot more bitter, but it hasn't aged as much. This is 15 years old at minimum, whereas this one has a no age statement. So your youngest whiskey in there is probably 5 years old. It's still got something, and I'm going to have to spend a bit more time getting to know it a bit warmer, because I have been unfair to it, I think, because I'm such a big fan of the 15-year-old. It's warming. It's got a bit more of a bourbon profile, I would say. It's younger. You could compare it to a very good bourbon, actually. I would say it's comparable to a Maker's Mark. It's smoother than a Maker's Mark, but the flavor profile is somewhat similar. There's some strong vanilla notes there. There's a bit of smoke, some bitterness. It's good though. I would say that the people who complain about Dalwhinnie Winter Gold are being somewhat unfair to it. It's not a bad whiskey at all. It's just not as special as the 15-year-old. I'm going to water this baby down now. So I've warmed it up closer to room temperature, and now I'm going to pipette in a few drops of water. See what that does. This should also bring it closer to room temperature again, because the water was at room temperature. Now that is transformative on the nose, absolutely transformative. All of a sudden, it's come alive with crispy Granny Smith apples, like you've just taken a big bite out of a fresh green apple. It's very sharp and fresh in a very pleasant way. Very perfumey, spring flowers on the nose. Beautifully fragrant actually. This has come alive with the water. Now that's another great comparison to make with the 15-year-old, which does not like the water. This one has transformed. On the palate too, different animal. Much softer, less aggressive than it was before. The smoke is more present. Now bear in mind, the 15-year-old is not smoky at all. Barest hint of smoke. This one, there is a lot of smoke on the nose now. A lot of smoke, and a lot of fresh fruit. Deciduous fruit though, not citrus or anything like that. Apples and pears and smoke. Really, really nice actually. So the Dalwhinnie Winter's Gold, my recommendation is not to follow their instructions to freeze this whiskey. You do not get the most out of it. The treacly liqueur-like nature of the frozen whiskey is quite fun. It's a neat party trick, but you do not get the best out of it. At roughly room temperature, with a drop of water, it really starts to work. I'm still not nearly as enthusiastic about it as I am with the 15-year-old, but it is in itself a very lovely dram, and I would recommend when it comes on its inevitable supermarket specials, as it does, because it is less sought after and less rare than the 15-year-old, that you buy a bottle. But if you really want to drink something special, get hold of the 15-year-old, because it should be a staple of any whiskey collection. Thanks very much guys, thanks for watching, and chin chin.